Does the violence in video games result in the players becoming more violent and aggressive? I believe that violence in video games can cause some players to become more violent. Due to various research studies, a connection has been identified between video games leading to violence in reality. In this speech, I will discuss the legal actions against and for video games. Then, I will discuss professional studies on violence in video games. After that, I will then discuss some video games and violence within demographics. Now that I've overviewed my plan for today's speech, I will begin my speech with sharing digital video game trends and statistics for 2019 from Lisa's Brown's 2019 post. So first is the gaming industry's economic impact. So this is by gender and age. As you notice that men are 54% and women are 46%. So men play more video games. And then for age, you notice the highest is the ages of 21 to 35, and the lowest would be 51 to 65. Then is the number of video gamers worldwide. As you can notice from 2014 to 2021, that the amount of people playing has risen from 1,815 million to 2,725 million. Next is types of games played based on gender. As you can see, there is a row of men and a row of women. So men, for console games, the number one game is shooter. And for women, it is action and adventure. And then you notice for the PC, like computers, the first one is shooter for men, and then again, it is action and adventure for women. But if you notice on the phone, on the mobiles, the last one is shooter, and the last one for women is arcade. So if you notice, there's a really big trend of shooters for men. With having discovered video game trends and stats, I will now be discussing some legal actions and lawsuits against video games according to Romeo Vitelli's 2013 post called "Can Video Games Cause Violence?" There are some cases against video games. I have chosen 3 to discuss with you. The first one is the Brown v. Entertainment Merchants Association. This occurred on June 27, 2011. Established that video games were protected under the First Amendment and that the content of video games cannot be regulated by government. Then was the family members of the Columbine High School massacre in 1999, which they sued 25 video game companies. The families believed that the video games were causing the shooters' violence. The game called Doom was a key influencer over the shooters. Lastly, the Christopher J. Ferguson influences on Supreme Court. He was an American psychologist of Texas A&M and International University. His research over the link between video game violence and antisocial behavior in children. Now that I've covered the legal actions with the video games, I will now talk about the professional studies on violence in video games. According to Sarah Saute's 2018 post called "Do Video Games Lead to Violence?" there are some professional studies worth to know. First is the American Psychological Association observation in August of 2015. APA made a link between violent video game use and the both increase in aggressive behavior, and then the decrease in prosocial behavior, empathy, and moral engagement. Next was the American Academy of Pediatrics post on media. Posted July of 2016 stated that the violent media was a bad example for children. They believe that video games should not use human or other living targets as award points for killing, because this teaches children to associate pleasure and success with their ability to cause pain and suffering to others. Lastly, Violent Video Games and Violent Crime, published February of 2016, depicts time periods of violent criminal offenses after release of new video games. However, the research did not provide The research provided that violence decreased in the time period of the release of the video games. Now let's summarize the main point for this persuasive speech. Most research supports that violence in video games can cause the players to become more violent because of all evidence and research provided. The results lead to make a connection between the violent video games causing players to be more violent. Because of all the evidence and research provided, the results lead to make a connection between violent video games causing players to become more violent. If you or a family member or a friend play violent video games, try to observe your or their behavior dealing with anger. Notice if you or they are more aggressive than others. If you do see a difference, it may be time to turn off the video game.